I'm Roger Nierenberg, and this is Living the Classical Life. Okay, so measure 66. That was the demonstration. Okay, now sit down for a moment and talk about that. Why did the cellos play so badly? Because you'll admit
Yes.
that was pretty bad.
It was
wasn't
bad. It took too long to start.
What?
You were making us doubt. We were waiting on the point of starting, but there was no clear moment. We didn't know anymore.
So wait a minute. First of all, did the section play well together?
No, we didn't have the same tempo.
And you say that it was because...
Well, because of you were communicating. Because of you, in fact. Yeah, sorry.
I know it was because of me.
Yeah.
So,
in fact, you were so making sure to be sure that you seemed very unsure. In fact, you were sort of preparing and doubting and doing the tempo inside your head that we didn't know anymore what you wanted to do, what you wanted us to do.
How did it feel to be working with a leader like that?
Very insecure. Yeah, very uncomfortable. You were not communicating to us, but to yourself, inside your mind, and we were left alone. That was my
Now, I
feeling.
want everybody to understand how uncomfortable. Did it affect you physically? Did it affect your body?
Yes, because I was at least 10 times ready to start, and every time holding back, in fact.
Good. Thank you. So, now, my witness, tell them what my intent was.
So the strategy was to make sure that he got it right. From the first moment, he had to get it right. So he was really concentrating on getting it right.
Yeah.
So that was the strategy. I can't emphasize getting it right from the first moment enough.
Right, exactly. So you can see that the right decision presented in the wrong way, in the wrong timing, is the wrong decision.
Mr. Nierenberg, thank you so much for being here on Living the Classical Life.
My
Welcome.
pleasure.
Are all conductors extroverts?
Yeah, I don't know. People are complicated, you know. I think conductors come alive on the podium. They're definitely extroverts on the podium. That's not the same as narcissists, but extrovert meaning that you're acting for a lot of people, you know. But some people, they come off the podium and they're not the same at all. I mean, Bernstein was a very big personality on the podium and off the podium. That was the way he was. But that's not the way everybody was. And Kleiber was reclusive. I didn't have any contact with him who could. He was just very private, and he was very exceptional. But you know, the thing about Kleiber that as I've read about him, I've learned, and I think the thing that was most important was the demands that he set on himself for understanding the music. He was not content to just understand how the music went. he wanted to penetrate into what the music was. And so he did a much more exhaustive study of the music than most conductors do. Well, he wasn't music director anywhere. He didn't have to carry this huge repertoire. So he could do it, but it's just it's a lot of work, but he did that. And some people said of Kleiber, he simply heard the best. He heard more in the music than any of us. But what does that mean? That's not really about his ear. It's about his understanding. And I'll tell you one story about him that my wife, who played under him at the Met, told me. At the end of La Boheme, same La Boheme performance that I went to, it's very dramatic, of course, the way it always is in Puccini. And Mimi is dying. And you can hear the music is so sweet, but it's a flickering flame. And the same group of people that were together and so happy in the first act, they're in the same place, and everyone but Rodolfo recognizes that she's died, but he doesn't know. It's so heartbreaking. And then he discovers, he said, first thing he hears is the silence. Not only silence from her, but everybody else. And he knows that something has happened because of that. And then he sees her. And then there's this brass chord. And Kleiber said to the Met players, he said, that is the ugly face of death. And then they played it. And they did something with the way they sustained that they were astonished. How come they had never done that before? How come they never made that sound and all? And it was what Kleiber gave them was showing what the real meaning of the music was that liberated everybody's capability. It's beautiful, isn't it?
It's astonishing. I'm getting goosebumps just listening to it. So you've been the conductor of many orchestras. Mm-hmm. At what point did the music paradigm enter the picture?
It didn't start with any particular idea, other than there was a little bit like when I would compose. When I would compose, I would sit for a long while until I heard some possibility appeared and drew me, and I wanted to explore that. It was a little bit like that with this. There was a possibility. I wasn't sure what it was, but I wanted to pursue it. And concurrent with that was this increasing awareness that the music-loving public was a very thin slice of the whole population, and that a lot of the stress within the music profession, it became clear to me, was simply because there wasn't enough demand for it. There wasn't enough audience. And if there were more audience, then a lot of the conflict between orchestras and their management and the boards and all that kind of thing, that would go away. And so I wanted to contribute to creating a robust music life, artistically robust, adventurous, risk-taking, like all the great artistic projects, have that. I wanted the orchestra to be imbued by that at a time where I could feel progressively every year it was getting more reactive, it was pulling itself into staying in what was safe and just trying to survive. So that was the impulse behind it. And the real question was there a way of reaching that much larger part of the public who had the capability of loving music and having their lives enriched by this kind of music? Was there a way to enrich them with this and enroll them in it? That's what I was looking for. If we didn't have such a rich trove of talent, it wouldn't be such a problem. But there are so many great musicians, and there's so much capacity for producing great music, and we just don't have the public that's sufficiently interested to support that. So my challenge was, not only could I get people interested, but could I get them to feel and crave the music and want more? That's what I was looking for.
Is it really the duty of each musician? Do you think more musicians should be involved with reaching new audiences?
I think you can say ideally yes, but you know, not everybody has the same talent set. You know, some people just have this fantastic ability to know the keyboard and get around the keyboard, and that's their talent. So if they're not particularly articulate, if they can't articulate it to an audience, I don't think that they should necessarily try. They should stay with what it is. It just happens to me that I'm a natural kind of proselytizer and an irrepressible communicator. And so that's something that I can do, and I think therefore I should do it.
Where did this impulse come from? I know that you prepare your own form of program notes. You showed me some of your video program notes. At what point did you start getting involved with talking about music?
Oh, I think right from the beginning. I think I was very annoying to my classmates in elementary school because I was always wanting to talk about this, and it was a frustration that I couldn't connect with them. It took a long while before I became at peace with that, and I found my way of feeling comfortable in a world of people who don't care at all about the same things that I care about.
What's the format of your presentations? I understand that you in fact seat some of the CEOs within the orchestra. So what happens then?
Well, let's start with why it is. If you're going to bring about a fundamental change, you know, a shift in behavior, and to leave behind the dysfunctional behavior, one of your enemies is the success that you've had in the past. And so people walk in very attached to their successes, their identities, their rank, their the wealth that they've accumulated, all those kinds of things. They carry that around, and everybody feels that in the business environment. They walk into this room, and there's an orchestra set up there, and they sit amongst the orchestra. They don't know what's going to be asked of them. A lot of them are sort of afraid that they're going to be asked to sing or play or do something. So it's an atmosphere of uncertainty. In addition to which, all the rank and power that any of them have accumulated is immediately stripped away because they don't know anything about orchestras. And the first thing that happens once the orchestra, I'm introduced, we conduct, we make some music, and then I say something like, we're going to look at the orchestra as if it's some kind of extremely successful organization and look for things that you can transplant into your own life to make yourself more successful. And the next thing that happened, I asked them to make some kind of simple observation about watching people play. And then I hand the microphone to somebody and say, so what did you see? Sounds innocent enough, but here's somebody in front of their whole workforce is being asked about something they don't know anything about. So it's very dramatic. It's very, in a way, it's humbling, but it's my job to make sure that everybody has big success in this, that everybody looks good and everybody succeeds. And then after a while, people begin to feel like this room is different than the way it is in business. This is actually fun. Nobody's judging. You know, I'm certainly not judging. I'm not letting anybody be judgmental. We're just playing. And I ask the orchestra to role play things that are funny for them, and then I ask the musicians to make comments about what just happened, and a lot I hear the musicians speak, and they've never heard musicians speak. They somehow think that they're going to sound the way they're dressed, which is in, you know, tails and everything, but they're so down to earth. Everybody gets so down to earth as it becomes tremendous fun for the players and for the participants. And then in that fun, I zero in more and more on the 500-pound gorilla on the table of what is it that has to change in this organization. And normally I do it by having the musicians model the dysfunctional behavior, or I model it myself. And it's very funny. Everybody's laughing. So
Now, what do you mean by dysfunctional behavior? I feel like we as musicians are, often great examples of dysfunctional behavior just on a day-to-day basis.
Well, we
what do you mean
see
by
ourselves that way. But let's say there's a dysfunction in an organization of territoriality.
Mm-hmm.
Territoriality is very dysfunctional because it inhibits collaboration, it inhibits innovation, it inhibits change when people sort of start digging in. And let's say, there's people feel that people are going to be laid off, they want to protect themselves, they want to, and let's say there's some paranoia, but it's so below the surface. The leadership knows that this is a problem, that we've got to get beyond this and start focusing on the work. Well, it's very hard to talk to anybody about that. Immediately people get really defensive. I'm not territorial, or you'd be territorial, whatever. You can't talk about it. But if I ask the musicians to start getting territorial by saying, let's say that our culture in this orchestra is a kind of a zero-sum mentality, that if anybody else sounds good, that's somehow at my expense. And I want to be the one that people are admiring. How would this passage sound? I leave it to the orchestra to process it. I give them 3 or 4 seconds to figure out what they're going to do. And out comes the same music that they just heard before, but now they hear it with all of this anger, and it's like the music isn't really the subject anymore. It's the personalities of the musicians as they're using the music to act out their own needs. And the audience can hear that. And then, by contrast, I might say to the musicians, how would it sound if your goal here, by the way you play, was to make everybody else better? So that just by hearing you play, everybody plays better and they work together. What would that be like? Well, the musicians know what to do. They don't, in real life, they don't always choose it, but they know what it is. And because I've asked for it, they do it. And then they hear this version A and version B, the dysfunctional and the functional. And there's nobody in the room who doesn't introspect about, am I that way? Am I the territorial? Do my people do that? Nobody's saying it. Nobody's confronting anybody. People are laughing about it. But everybody's introspecting. So there's a lot of soul searching going on in the room, but it's all private.
So you've been doing this for over 20 years.
Yeah.
Have you found any surprising reactions from your audiences? Are there people who are initially skeptical of the whole idea?
Oh, well, of course, there are some audiences that are completely skeptical. There's some audiences, of course, these things happen normally in business meeting, and they don't have a choice whether to show up. They have to show up. And sometimes you can feel the vibe at the beginning is, I don't want to be here.
Do you find that intimidating?
Not at all. I mean, just because I've seen it and I have a lot of confidence that the process, the way we design it, is going to disarm that. And that's a word that a lot of business people use when they talk about the music paradigm, that it's disarming. And there was one woman from one organization where she attended the CEO meeting, and afterwards she called me up and she wanted me to engage the music paradigm for the meeting of her division. And she said, I've been working at this company for 15 years, and there are people on whose faces I've never seen a smile. And I'm sitting inside that orchestra, I'm looking around, and there are all those people, and they're laughing, and they're having a good time. She said, who are these people? I've never seen these people before. So it has this tremendously healing effect.
So is that the power of music, or is that the power of your personality?
Well, I don't think it's my personality, although I have a way of making people feel comfortable, not threatened. I definitely hold authority, but it's not in a threatening way. It's in part that it's like I'm hitting the bullseye with exactly who they are and how they behave, and they're not used to somebody feeling so known. But the other thing is that the music, they don't even think about that, but the music, they hear the dysfunctional and they hear it played well, and it's so beautiful. And they're affected by that, and somewhere they're thinking, what would it be like if we were that way? What would it be like if I was that way? And they're wanting it. And in the process, because it's not on the agenda, but in the process, they're discovering this experience of hearing live music and how healing it can be and how inspiring and energizing and all that. So they're not really expecting that.
So there are so few people who do this kind of work today, Ben Zander maybe, but there was a previous generation, also an American conductor, Leonard Bernstein, and you grew up as a New Yorker. What was Leonard Bernstein's influence on you in the work that he did, both as a composer and a conductor, but also in his outreach?
Yeah. Well, I remember I went to the original production of West Side Story at the Winter Garden Theater. I still remember, 1956 maybe.
Wow.
And I loved that, and I knew it by heart. I was deeply moved by it. And I went many times to the Philharmonic. I heard the Philharmonic at that time was playing in Carnegie Hall because Lincoln Center hadn't been built. I once went to one of the young people's concerts with Bernstein. I was so disillusioned because what you didn't see on television was all the kids making paper airplanes of their programs and throwing them down into Carnegie Hall.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, you don't see it on television. But I watched a lot of the programs on TV, and he was, he made music very interesting. So I think everybody was influenced by Bernstein. I think for me a greater influence was when I saw him work and teach at Tanglewood. Because he was just a very generous teacher, and he was another one who had this compelling need to teach and share. I think everybody was influenced by him.
In the world of conductors, almost anyone you speak to mentions the name Carlos Kleiber as having a particular magic. What was the magic of Carlos Kleiber? Who did he represent?
Yeah. Well, I went to 3 Carlos Kleiber performances at the Met. And I remember the first one was La Boheme. And I was just amazed. I was amazed by the balance. I was amazed by the intonation. I was amazed by the ensemble. It seemed so effortless, everything, and so totally expressive of what it was. And then I watched him a little bit, and so I knew there was, something gestural going on as well. And that had a big influence on me because what he does with the orchestra is different from a lot of other conductors. He doesn't beat time. I mean, people still think that the baton is like the mainspring of a clock, and what you do is you're setting the time for the orchestra, and the orchestra is playing in the time. And that's just not the way things really work. That there is a sense of time, but the time is alive everywhere. And the thing is, how do you get that sense of time to align so that all these clocks are going at the same speed? But the conductor is not the one who's generating the time. It's the musicianship of the orchestra. Now, sometimes, of course, you generate the time. But sometimes you don't. And in the concert that I just did this last weekend, I remember in the last piece, I was feeling very connected with the orchestra, and I thought to myself, I'm not showing any time. I'm building this climax, and I'm checking, is the orchestra rolling? You know, is there momentum in the orchestra? Are they going? And they were. So I was just making something bigger than timekeeping. And I kind of learned that from Kleiber.
When we watch the videos of Kleiber, in fact, you can see moments where he stops conducting altogether.
Yeah.
Bernstein also did that once with the Vienna Philharmonic.
Yeah, with the Brahms scherzo, the Fourth Symphony.
Did he do it there too? I know that there was also a Haydn symphony
right,
movement, and
yeah.
that was just absolutely extraordinary.
Yeah.
He set them off, and he let them
But
go.
really not so extraordinary at all, because every orchestra could do that. And in the music paradigm, in every session, there's one place where I say the orchestra can play so well, they don't need me at all. And not only do I ask him to play, but then I ask him to play it again in a different tempo. And then I ask him to play it again, but make rubato. And it's kind of revelatory for the musicians also, because it opens up these channels. But that's the way Kleiber was. Somebody told me a story about a particular entrance that the Met Orchestra, as many times, I think it was La Traviata, as many times as they played, you can imagine how many times they played that in the course of their careers. There was this one entrance that was always a little unsteady. And Kleiber was conducting, it was unsteady also. And so I think Neil Rosensheim was the tenor, and he said, Neil, come to the lip of the stage. He said, sing that for us. And so he did. And he said, be with him. And then it's like it just fell together, not only for all of Kleiber's performances, but for every performance thereafter, that he had the way of finding the key that got everybody to think in such a way that the execution became simple. And I emulate that. That's what I try to do. Of course, I'm not the genius that Kleiber was, but you can still do it. You can still do it.
So there's so much going on in the world today. Do your messages about music, through music, take on additional urgency in engaging with the world? Are there particular groups that you're still hoping to reach?
Well, what I've discovered with the music paradigm is that the music paradigm is like a key. It unlocks people's capability to feel things and to feel together as a group in ways that they haven't before. And I've done it so many times that I know that it's always going to work. And so I feel a kind of responsibility because I'm in possession of this tool that could have such impact. So, of course, business organizations are, engaging the music paradigm because they've heard that it's the most effective thing for aligning their organization and helping kind of explaining to people what needs to be done, what behavioral changes, what mental changes have to come in the organization. But I'm interested in reaching beyond that. And my last foray has been into the world of football. So I did an engagement with the official organization for the Big Ten Football Conference. And I met some famous football referees, some of the most famous. And that was an honor for me to sit between two Super Bowl referees and watch a video that was prepared for this seminar about, was this a catch or wasn't it a catch? And these two guys are telling me their thoughts about, what makes for a catch and what doesn't. And this, maybe the most famous referee, he leans over to me and he says, catch or no catch is the most difficult call in football. And then I did a presentation for those officials, the referees, the umpires, the linesmen, and it was a music paradigm presentation about officiating.
I was about to say, doesn't that sound like a slightly unlikely crowd, but maybe there's a direct connection?
Well, when I looked at them at first, I thought, this is a really unlikely crowd. And are they going to go for it? Mm-hmm. But when it started reaching them, and we started talking about the difficulty of making difficult calls about small pieces of time, when you're in a fishbowl and everybody is watching you, and how to keep yourself focused on what's in front of you, and to kind of mentally slow it down in your ear and your eye, which is exactly what the officials do, and it's what conductors do. They knew that I was talking their language, and they got very into it. They got very enthusiastic about it.
So finally, what is your dream for how people, audience members, or just people in general, will listen at a concert or in life in general?
To hear music in a way when your heart is open and the music reaches you, it's such a fundamentally nourishing thing. I mean, you feel fortified, you feel strong, you feel energized, you feel purged. It's a wonderful thing. It doesn't happen to me in every concert I go to, but it does in many. And for more people to have that experience, I think that's the goal of every musician. We all do it in the way that we can. Well, there's a nice story that my colleague Richard Danielpour, the composer, told me about Bernstein. He said Bernstein was always trying to recreate what he had at Tanglewood when he was a young composer and conductor. So he liked to surround himself with young composers and conductors, always trying to find that again. So Richard was one of them. They were somewhere, I'm not sure where it was, far away. And they all knew, they'd seen Bernstein with his coughing fits and having lost his respirator and the panic, and they knew how marginal he was. And then they gave them the worst seats, which are like in the front row on the side. And so when the stage door opened, they could see him there hacking and coughing away, and they looked at each other and said, oh my God. And then they saw him come out, and for this performance of Tchaikovsky's Fourth Symphony, which is 45 minutes long, and they thought, is he going to be able to get through this? What's going to happen to him? And Richard said to me, by the fourth movement, he said, you looked at this guy on the podium. He said, it looked like a 35-year-old man. And he said, such was the power of music. That force of those vibrations to connect and energize and heal. So music has this incredible power. And how do we create the circumstances that enable people to connect with it? That's what I want to do.
Mr. Nierenberg, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been a pleasure, and we wish you much success in the future.
Thank you.
Awesome.
It was fun.
Yes.